Just think about it in terms of not trying to fit into somebody else's box in terms of how to use AI, but really in terms of how to make your life better and sort of make the things that you don't like doing easier and better.
Welcome back to the Tourism AI podcast. Peter and I are joining you once again this week to cover some more of the top stories in AI, what's going on in the space of artificial intelligence, and relate it all back to tourism. So I think we're going to kick off the episode today by talking about how you can build AI into more of a habit in your life and how there are a lot of similarities between, say, building an AI routine and building a fitness routine. So, Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about those two things as they relate to each other?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying that this kind of, I guess, topic came to me when I got an email. So I'm on a Microsoft email list. So Microsoft has a newsletter that they send out. It's called Work Labs, and I'm on their Work Labs email list. And they had sort of sent a email basically saying, here's a 4-point plan to tame email overload according to Microsoft. And that email kind of got me thinking. So just maybe for context, I'll explain the 4-point plan, and then I'll explain how this got to where we are in this conversation. But their 4-point plan was, oh, you can use tools like Microsoft Copilot to distill your emails, so summarize long email threads and highlight key action items, saving effort and time. And yeah, that sounds great. Dig, so search for specific information across emails, Teams messages, and files, streamlining the process. Sounds great. Draft emails, writes initial email drafts using which users can review and enhance speeding up communications. Sounds great. And finally, diagnose, evaluate email tone and clarity, providing suggestions for improvement, obviously, when you're writing it. So this email kind of got me thinking, not so for context, we're a Google company. I had for a while had Google Gemini Office kind of workspace turned on. And my experience with that was that it was sort of hard for me to get into the habit of using those tools in my email because I have really deep email habits. I think email is probably something we all in our work environment use more than almost any other tool. So we have pretty, I think, entrenched habits. And so it sort of got me thinking a little bit about how to build better habits in AI in context of this sort of a message and sort of some of the things that are going to be challenges. And so, what I will say is number one, apparently Google has now through Gemini rolled out its own sort of tools, a suite of tools, which we're going to be testing soon, retesting, I should say. So we tested them when they were first out. They weren't great. But apparently, things like even just the ability to search with Gemini's AI search capability is way better than searching through email was in the past. So, you can kind of talk to your email sort of chatbot and sort of ask questions and sort of kind of try to find whatever it is you're finding. I don't know about you, Emily, but I find finding anything in my Gmail account to be one of the most horrendous experiences I can possibly imagine. I don't understand where emails go, how it happens. Very bad for search. So the fact that they needed artificial intelligence to come in and help search get better, I guess, is a good thing. Anyways, I digress. But my point is, so when I look at this list from Microsoft, certainly that dig feature and the ability to search better through email is, I think, something that's going to probably be something that people will use quite a lot. But things like distilling and drafting and diagnosing tone and things like that, that's just going to be hard. It's good. I think we'll get there as the tools sort of evolve and as our AI use evolves, but it's not really going to be that easy. So, what I tell people all the time when it comes to AI use is, start with the stuff that you hate doing the most. Start with the stuff that's the most painful to you, and use AI to make those things less painful, make them better. And so, for example, I hear a lot of criticism in the AI space around, oh, people say they use AI, but they've only ever used the free AI, ChatGPT or whatever it is, right? And I think that's, that's where people are at, and that's just perfectly fine. So I think for anybody to criticize anybody for just using that, I think is not right. And at the end of the day, probably most people, that's all they'll ever do. And that's fine too, right? And so, again, I sort of think about it as, this came to mind for me because I absolutely despise going and working out and like lifting weights. Like I can't think of anything I'd rather not do. And so like I will never do that. And so, it's similar in technology adoption, in AI adoption. It's like if you get somebody to try to do something that it's not natural to them, they don't like doing, they're probably not going to do it. Whereas I love boxing, I love hiking, I love going on walks, I love many other forms of fitness, that it's a pleasure for me to go do those things. And I sort of think about AI adoption in the same way. Like if it's something like, hey, you know what, I really hate editing my written content, then use AI to edit. I hate coming up with ideas. I'm not a creative thinker. Well, that's a great use case for AI. It's a very good creative thinker, right? So again, just think about it in terms of not trying to fit into somebody else's box in terms of how to use AI, but really in terms of how to make your life better and sort of make the things that you don't like doing easier and better. And I think that that's going to be kind of the way that we're going to get to AI usage more deeply. I can tell you from my own experience, Emily, that I started with just basic writing, and I've been evolving as I've been going, as I've been sort of by myself finding better use cases and better ways to use it. Although primarily for me, I still primarily use it to write, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key point there, Peter, is you have to find a solution that really works for you. And in both AI and fitness, we've kind of talked about choosing the right tool for your team, or even just you, in terms of, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT as an example. All three are great for their own use cases, but you may find that one works better than the other, just as you might like boxing more than lifting weights. So
Right.
the
Yeah.
takeaway here is find the thing that really works for you rather
Well,
than
well,
working against the grain.
yeah. And this is again what I say to people about working out, and the same thing that I would say to people about using AI. It's like until you've tried it, you don't know what you're gonna like. So yes, in theory, going to the gym and pumping weights sounds great. And probably even the first time it's okay, but you know what? Then your muscles are gonna really hurt the next day, and you might hate it afterwards, or whatever, right? So the point is that you got to try things to see how they make you feel, and then to determine whether there's something you like doing, whether it's something you're going to continue with. So trying is the first step, and I like what you said there, Emily. Different AI chatbots and large language models interact differently and feel different. So trying it more than once and trying different ones for a period of time. So, one of the things that we talk about a lot is, don't commit to 50 people on a 1 year license to OpenAI. Try 3 people on the free version for a month, or on a paid version, $20 a month version for a month, and then try 3 other people on a different tool, and then get together and talk about it. And so it's sort of experiment. I've been hearing a lot about Claude's 3.5 Sonnet and just how amazing it is for people to use. I still haven't had a chance to dig in, but apparently the user experience is really good there. People really enjoy it, and it feels very nice to use. So try it, and then you'll know.
Yeah, absolutely. For another example, I find that Gemini is a lot better at reasoning, and it'll break down what the response that it's given you for what reason. So if you need to better understand why an output is the way that it is, I would recommend Gemini. But that's just my 2 cents.
Well, and similarly to that, Emily, like I find Gemini to be really good. I've said this before on the podcast, really good at how do I do something in Google, or how do I do something on Excel, or like really good for like step-by-step instructions for how to use a lot of technology tools, quite frankly. Whereas I find, apparently Claude is the best from a writing perspective, as an example. And then I think, Chat GPT-4o is, sort of probably the best in terms of multimodal features. Certainly custom GTPs, although now the other tools have sort of started to catch up with their own versions of those tools. So the other piece to this is things are ever evolving. So I can imagine just going back to the gym analogy. Maybe if you used you remember those old like weights with like it was like almost like concrete in the middle, and they were plastic weights on the outside, to proper weights, to like a play machine or whatever. Like there are many different ways to work out a bicep, and many different tools to help you work out a bicep, right? And I like old fashioned push ups and chin ups, and those are one set of tools that you could use to achieve the same result as curling with a weight or whatever it is, right? So I think the analogy just really fits for me.
Nice. Before we move on to our next topic, any other habit building tips you have for people in the AI or fitness space?
Yeah. So I mean, personally, I talk about for example, like, are you a team sports person or are you an individual person, right? So if you're a team sports person, I think that AI adoption is potentially a team sport in terms of creating internal competitions, creating space for people to talk about AI uses, creating a place where maybe you could save all your best prompts or your best AI uses. creating space to have conversations and to collaborate, right? So like if you're a team sport person and or have a good team environment at your business, then maybe think about a team approach in terms of testing AI, coming up with best practices, coming up with a knowledge base, all that kind of stuff. If you're more of an individual person and you kind of want to just quietly try things on your own and you don't want to talk about them until you're ready, like, everybody's got a different personality. So, sort of, I think similar to sports and fitness, like certain people are they gravitate towards certain things. And, that probably is helpful in terms of thinking about AI as well, right? So, I like to try things on my own, but then I also like to collaborate. But I don't want to go into a collaboration session not having tried it on my own first, right? So I'm sort of a hybrid team sports, individual sports kind of guy.
Nice. So I think the takeaway there is do what works for you and what works for your organization.
And the most important takeaway, Emily, is just do. I'm a broken record on this, but just start doing and
Yeah.
start trying and then see. The other thing I'll say just before we move on from this topic is there's a lot of research out there about, the numbers of people who said they've used generative AI is fairly high.
Mhm.
The number of people who said they've tried generative AI at work is fairly high. But when you dig into those numbers a little deeper, what they show is, oh, maybe somebody once tried ChatGPT once at work. So that's a very different story from somebody who uses generative AI at work, right? So if I tried it once and I never went back, it's very different from I use it every day.
Yeah.
Or I use it all day every day, which is sort of like, probably where I fit in. Right. So there's a big spread and there's a lot of numbers out there that sort of are quite misleading and tell different stories for different reasons. But the reality is that the vast majority of people may have tried it and probably have never gone back. And so, I think similar to habits is you got to kind of keep going back. You got to kind of keep working those same muscles over and over again before you develop muscle memory, right? So, similar, one of the things I tell people in my intro to AI training course is your assignment after this course is don't use Google for a week, use an AI tool, right? So that's a great place to start. And I often find that, I assign that to people. That's the last thing I say to people before the course is over. And one of the first things people tell me is in the next course is, oh my God, I've been using AI. It's so amazing. I love it. It's great. It's so much better than Google, blah, blah, blah. Right. So, the point is that, little challenges for yourself like that, right? So, hey, you know what? I'm just going to try using Perplexity for a week. I'm just going to try using ChatGPT for a week. I'm going to, just try using this tool instead of this tool, right? So, we all have to, whatever methodology works for ourselves. If you have to have 10 sticky notes on your screen because that's the way you need to remind yourself, really hard, right? Like I get up, go to my computer, and the first thing I do is I open my browser and I open my email,
Yeah.
right? Second thing I do is I open my next tab and Google is on my screen, right? So these are just automatic things that happen. I don't even think about them. And so changing habit requires thought, purpose, action, sort of deliberate action and consistency, much like the gym.
There you go. All right, I want to pivot a little bit. We're going to talk about, well, we've talked a lot about AI. I don't know if you've noticed if you've been listening to our podcast, but we are moving into a new space kind of called artificial general intelligence, a little bit different from just simple AI. We call it AGI. Peter, can you tell us a little bit more about the difference between the two and what that means kind of for the tourism industry?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I will say is that the term artificial general intelligence isn't something where there's like a well-defined definition that everybody agrees on, right? So that's the starting point. So generally speaking, I mean, artificial intelligence is the simulation of human intelligence in machines which are designed to think and act like humans. So we all know we've all used ChatGPT. You write something in there, it's actually a prediction machine. It predicts the next words based on the words you put in, and it's knowledge based, right? Artificial general intelligence is like where it's sort of as good or better than humans, basically across all functions.
Hmm.
So that's sort of like really like a pretty big step change from, kind of just like a tool that is good at predicting the next words in a sequence of words versus, something that can actually, you know, think on its own, improve on its own, take multiple steps, reason, right? These are the types of things that start to become, oh, are we closer to AGI now because the machines are doing these types of things? A little more advanced reasoning, multi-step reasoning, maybe go take actions, like for example, things like, go and let's just say from a tourism perspective, hey, I want to go to Vancouver this weekend. Tell my AI agent to go on the internet, search all the prices. It already knows my flying habits and my times that I prefer to fly and that I like economy class or whatever it is. And it'll go search all those things, and then it actually could take action on your behalf, book the trip, all that kind of stuff. So that's, there's sort of this progression towards AGI, which is now it goes beyond just you give it a prompt, it gives you an answer, to more like you give it something to do and it takes multiple steps and it reasons and it thinks and it sort of actually takes action for you. That's sort of like the kind of the progression. So again, it's not like a cut and dry, Sam Altman actually from OpenAI talks a lot about, it's not like all of a sudden we're gonna be like, yes, we've hit AGI, we've made it. It's sort of like gonna just sort of evolve over time. The technology is gonna keep getting better, and all of a sudden we're gonna be here. There are some people who kind of say we're sort of there already. And then there are other people who say this whole concept of AGI is crazy. We're never gonna get like that is so far away from where we are. So again, the community is very diverse and split on this question. But what I will say is there's no question in my mind, and they're pretty open about it, that OpenAI's mission is to achieve AGI, which is the context of this article we wrote in this conversation.
Wow. Yeah. And so where do you see that really plugging in for the tourism industry?
Yeah, so before I answer that question, Emily, I'll sort of maybe just explain again the context of this article we sort of wrote and what we're talking about, because basically what happened was OpenAI had an all hands meeting, internal all hands meeting, which is basically an all staff meeting. And after that meeting, so at that meeting, apparently they shared this 5 steps to AGI. So it's sort of like a bit of a mechanism that OpenAI has created in order to sort of judge where we're at in this path to AGI. And so they've kind of given these 5 steps as to, okay, once we kind of achieve this, maybe we're there type of thing, right? And so this was leaked, and it was, leaked to the media, and it was kind of apparently verified by an OpenAI staff person. And so let me just sort of, first of all, define the 5 steps, because I think they're kind of important, and then that'll help me answer your question. So step 1 is chatbots. So AI with natural conversational language abilities capable of engaging in coherent. So clearly we're there, right? That is sort of that's just a step. 2 is what they call reasoners, AI with human level problem solving abilities across broad range of topics. And so that's step 2. Step 3 is agents. So AI systems that can take actions independently or from human instruction. Step 4 is innovators, AI that can aid in the invention of new ideas and contribute to human knowledge. So that's like, I feel like really a big leap from step 3 to step 4 in my mind. And then step 5 is organizations, AI capable of performing all the work of an organization independently. So those are the 5 steps. According to this internal leak from OpenAI, we're basically kind of just finished, like we're kind of moving from step 1 to step 2. And I'll just say that the timing of this leak was kind of interesting because at the same week as this was leaked, this Project Strawberry was leaked. This internal kind of thing that OpenAI is working on is called Project Strawberry. And Project Strawberry, there's a big history to Project Strawberry because around the time when Sam Altman was fired by his board from OpenAI, there was this like a project called QStar, which was a secret project, and some people thought that maybe he was fired because he didn't tell the board about QStar. He wasn't sort of saying enough information, and that they've made some breakthroughs. That was never proven to be true. But anyways, I think that most people paying attention to this space can safely conclude that Project Strawberry is probably the same thing as QStar was, or some version of the thing that QStar was. And what Project Strawberry is all about is this concept of AI's enhanced ability to reason, right? And so that's sort of like, so things like doing math, solving more complicated math problems, multi-step problem solving, things like that. So according to this leak, we're sort of kind of in this sort of entering this reasoning stage, or this reasoner stage. And really in the AI space, everybody's talking about agents. That's sort of the future, right? So that's sort of this agentic future. Anyways, all that being said, is to answer your question now, Emily, the impacts of this on tourism are quite interesting if you start to think them through. So I would say that level 1 to level 3 are very exciting for the tourism industry. So obviously there are major staff shortages, major labor shortages in tourism. So, tools, first of all, chatbots obviously help us write faster and create content faster and do all those things, which is great. Reasoners obviously would maybe help, with things like little more advanced customer service agents from an AI perspective or models from an AI perspective and that type of thing. Whereas agents now get really exciting, right? All of a sudden they can take actions independently or based on human instructions. So, I can just imagine a future where I'm interacting with a tourism website or tourism brand or whatever it is, and I'm talking to their AI agent and I'm saying, hey, I want to come camping on this day, and it'll actually book my camping for me, or it'll help me, you know what I mean? Or my own agent will do that based on my preferences. I'll go talk to their agent, and now humans are out of the loop and our agents are booking things and making things happen. So I think from just thinking about the tourism industry from the labor shortages we're dealing with perspective, these first three things are very exciting because they can potentially solve some problems for us in terms of we don't have the labor to do all those things. We can get agents and reasoners to do these things, and then we can redeploy humans to do other things, right? The innovators piece I think is quite interesting. Obviously, coming up with some innovation is kind of interesting, but the one that really starts to get interesting to me, if you start thinking through it, is this organization. So like, to me, this concept of AI capable of performing all the work in organization independently is a bit of a scary thought. And so I think in tourism, generally speaking, in tourism, we're a human-centric business. We're a human sec. So I don't perceive any threats to the tourism industry per se. Like obviously, if I want to go whitewater rafting, I'm not going to have an AI agent take me on a raft. I'm going to take a human take me on a raft and give me a great human experience, right? So that won't change. However, if you really start to think through these different steps, it's like, what happens to people in work when you literally have AI capable of performing all the work organization independently? Like, what happens to jobs? And so, there's people obviously that are talking about things so there are obviously people talking about things like universal basic income as a solution to this, right? So okay, we'll bring in universal basic income, and people will have all this time on their hands and life will be wonderful and we'll be able to do all these things. So sounds like a great utopian future coming if you believe it. But I question a lot of things, or there's just things that are not worked out with respect to that utopian future. And what I will say is that I think the people that are dreaming up that utopian future are currently millionaires and billionaires building these machines, trying to convince us they're amazing. And I'm not sure that your average person that's making $80,000 to $100,000 a year all of a sudden doesn't have employment, or doesn't know what the future of employment looks like, and is all of a sudden on some universal basic income, which, what does that look like? It's just very unclear. So like, to me, it's about more, what does that mean for people's ability to travel and actually experience tourism? What does that mean for poverty versus wealth? I will say, Emily, that I'm personally quite optimistic, and I think that AI will create an enormous amount of economic wealth and opportunity for everybody. But there are serious questions to be asked with respect to this, and sort of what does this mean, and what does it mean for jobs? And okay, if I'm on universal basic income, can I still go earn a living additional money? Or like, there's just a lot of questions, right? And so, longer term for the tourism industry, I don't think that this has a negative impact on people working in the tourism industry, but it may have an impact on people's ability to actually travel and do tourism, right? So yet to be determined.
Yeah, I think you're pointing out an important piece of this entire puzzle is that lots of people don't really know what the future is going to look like with this. Us included, we're still, observing and waiting to see how things kind of shake out. I think governments are also having those critical conversations in terms of regulation and legislation and making sure that, well, hopefully they're thinking about how to set up their citizens for success here, no matter which direction we take it, and hopefully putting some solid regulations on things to make sure that we're all well taken care of, regardless of where we do go. But again, at the center of all of that, regardless of what industry you're having this conversation in, it's important to understand what could happen and how to use the tools so that you're ahead of the curve whenever, this does kind of come to light, which is why we do beat you over the head with it every time we record. Try it, get familiar with it, make sure you understand how it works.
Yeah, I think my biggest point related to this, Emily, is that, we don't know what kind of future we're moving towards, and I don't see enough people paying enough attention. There's literally, I don't think there are coincidences. I don't think it's a coincidence that this scale came out from OpenAI. It was leaked, and then the same week Strawberry project was leaked. I know that OpenAI has been talking about training ChatGPT 5 already. That's pretty open. And so I just feel like we're going towards this future very quickly, and the world is going to change very quickly, and the vast majority of people are barely paying attention, and that is a concern. Like, you can't change the trajectory of this, but you can change. Certainly, you can form an opinion about it. You can learn how to adapt now before it's too late. And you can sort of think about your current career trajectory, what it might mean, how to become more AI enabled just in case so that you're ready for it. Right. Like there's just a lot of thinking that needs to happen. And we also as a society have to have conversations about, why are we racing towards this future? What is the goal? Who benefits from this? Who loses from this? Right. So like there to your point, we need to have societal conversations. This needs to be part of all election campaign dialogue. Like this is a big deal. Like we are heading towards a future that humanity has never seen before. We have no idea what's coming, and we need to be talking about it. So I mean, I feel like we have a duty to do that. That's why we're doing it now. And I just encourage anybody who's listening to this podcast, reading our blog, involved with the network, is think deeply about this. Think about what it means for you, your family, your future, your job. It matters. And you're not going to change it, but at least you can do what you can to be prepared for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Well, we are going to move a little bit more into tourism specifically. We've talked a little bit about how AI can support marketing. I think we kind of weave that into pretty much every episode that we have, whether, explicitly or implicitly. But we want to talk a little bit about how tourism brands should think about content in the age of AI. Obviously, there's a lot of, benefits and clear ease of access to AI to make this a little bit easier for folks. But Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about how AI is changing the content production for tourism operators, CMOs, and really everybody?
Everybody, yeah, yeah. So I mean, what I'll say about this piece, Emily, is that obviously this is something that's deeply important to us because we run a marketing agency and we do a lot of content for a lot of clients. And I think deeply about this topic because ultimately, we know that we will not be able to charge the same prices that we have been charging for the type of content that we create. And we also know that the internet's going to be flooded with really a lot of junk content for the next little while. In fact, I kind of think that the internet's going to become so polluted that people may get really turned off of it because there's going to be so much crap content out there. So, as an agency and as any brand, there's a need for us all to think about sort of content in the age of AI. So that's sort of what I wanted to kind of talk about. So I have kind of 5 steps that I put together into a little blog here. And so number one is double down on Google's EAT framework. So for those who don't know, EAT stands for expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So Google's put this framework forward as sort of a best practice for search engine optimization for SEO content. Now, the world of search is changing substantially as a result of AI. So don't do this for Google. But Google actually put this framework out, and it's like a good best practice around content development in general. So it's not about, even though it's Google's framework, we don't know what's going to happen to the future of search and the future of Google, but their framework is still a good framework. And so I think, following it's really good. And I'm just going to walk through the framework a little bit and sort of give context as to why I think it's a good way to go. Is so first of all, in the age of AI where you literally can pump out 10,000 blogs in an hour or a couple hours or whatever it is of crap content, having a person, a face, experience, authority, an expert with firsthand knowledge, sharing is gonna win it, right? And so that's the concept. That's the concept behind the EAT framework in general. And it's really sort of putting forward real humans with their real experience, authentic content with authority, from trustworthy sources, right? And so I think just conceptually that's a great starting point. And then, the other things I say then is that the tools, if you're using the EAT framework as your starting point, then using all the AI tools that exist out there can really easily make you go multimodal really quickly. And so we'll talk through kind of Tourism AI Network's approach to this. But so step 2 is go multimodal, and we'll talk about how to do that. Step 3 is use tools like 11 Labs native audio. We'll talk about that in a second. Step 4 is consider the value of AI chatbots. We talked about that in the last podcast, and with tourism Kelowna, but I'll talk a little bit more of that. And then finally, something that's deep, that's sort of part of my heart and part of my things I want to do for the tourism industry is explore opportunities in licensing and brand partnerships, right? So, you know, let's kind of walk through those. So on the go multimodal really, let's just talk about this podcast as an example. So the way we create this podcast is typically I will write a few blogs in a week, 3 to 5 blogs, let's call it, around different topics that I'm interested in. And really it's a great way for me. I'm a writer by trade or by career. So I've been writing for a long time. And so that's a good way for me to get my thoughts out, is just sit down and write a blog. Now I use AI to help me with that because I'm also dyslexic and it takes me a long time to write. So it speeds up my process a little bit, which is great. We take those blogs, Emily, you grab those blogs, you've created a custom GTP on ChatGPT that helps distill blogs and turn them into a kind of a bit of a script and a question and answer kind of script, if you will, for a podcast. We use that script essentially to record this podcast, which we record on Zoom, right? Then you take that podcast recording and you put it into Descript, which is a great video editing, podcast editing tool. Descript also allows you to turn it into shorts, so short clips, video clips. We then also, I think Kat has a custom GTP that she's created that allows us to take, I believe she takes the blogs and turns them into social media posts, but I'm not 100% sure. And then she also takes the shorts that we created from the script and puts them into another tool called Lumen 5, which creates kind of little quick videos using AI and sort of some background and some music and things like that, right? So just thinking through that process, essentially we took a blog and we turned it into 10, 12 pieces of content in multiple modes. Pretty awesome if you think about it, right? So, in our parent company, CIPR Communications, as I mentioned, we're a marketing communications agency. There's no way we're writing 500-word blogs for our clients anymore. That's just going away, right? So this method that I just explained for how we create our podcast or turn a blog into multimodal content is probably something is something we're gonna be rolling out actually really soon for our clients to give them more value. So at the end of the day, I don't think marketing agencies are going away because businesses are busy. Businesses are busy being businesses and doing the things they're good at, and they rely on agencies like us to innovate on the content space to give them more value for the dollars they pay. And so that's the direction we're going.
I will say too, a couple different pieces that kind of land with what you've just said. One, we are seeing Google crack down on content already. We've seen probably 2 or 3 different Google algorithm updates over the last several months where we've seen folks who were previously ranking really well, and they still are, don't get me wrong, but we have seen them take a dip just because of these algorithm updates. And then the other thing that I will say on multimodal is we are seeing across the board video content being significantly more popular on multiple platforms. So anytime you can take your blog content and turn it into video content, you're going to be sailing.
Yeah. And again, I had this conversation with somebody the other day, but it's like, I don't have time to read blogs, but I do have time to listen to audio or watch a video while I'm on a walk, or what I mean, multitask. So that's where it makes sense. And that actually goes into the next piece, which is tools like 11 Labs native audio. So for context, 11 Labs is an AI audio tool. So, you can record your voice and deepfake yourself, but you can also do other things, right? So there's pre-loaded voices in there, and they a couple weeks ago released this native audio feature, which is really cool. So essentially the concept is, you add this feature to your website, and all of a sudden, instead of reading, people can just essentially 11 Labs will read the content on your website for the people. So I think that's an awesome feature. I think that something like that's coming out in video probably sooner than later. So it'll probably be able to turn your website content into a quick short video or whatever, right? I'm not 100% sure how that will work, but the audio, the native audio component is fantastic because not only does it now all of a sudden make it more plausible that I might consume your content because I will never read it. I don't have time. But also it makes it more accessible for people, right? So just from a accessibility perspective, this is a win, right? This is awesome. So I love this feature. We're going to turn it on Tourism AI Network soon. Just doing a couple things. We're just been a little busy, but I think it's a really cool way to sort of go backwards and make old content multimodal more quickly, right? So I think that's a really cool feature. The next one is consider the value of AI chatbots. And I included this one in here because because of the interview we had with Steve from Tourism Kelowna a couple weeks ago, where he kind of talked about the fact that their AI chatbot has created almost like a two-way communication channel between their customers and their brand. And they're learning more about their customers, the types of questions being asked, the kind of information, right? When people are asking. So I think beyond the chatbot just being able to like answer people's questions with less pain, which is really helpful. I think the kind of two-way communication that comes from a chatbot like this and the learnings that a brand could get are really powerful, right? So that's again something we'll be turning on a chatbot for Tourism AI Network really soon here because I think it's really cool. So and certainly again that sort of just makes your brand more accessible to a lot more people. And certainly now if we take the 11 Labs sort of concept and a chatbot concept, I mean, you can imagine a future soon where you're just talking to a website and it's talking back to you and you're getting the information you want, which is awesome, right? And then the final kind of piece in this article I wrote and this topic is explore opportunities in licensing and brand partnerships. So, straight up, if you're a DMO, probably your information was lifted by all of these organizations, all these businesses that built these LLMs, large language models. And we need to band together, we need to get together, and we need to figure out a way to go back to these large language models and get compensated. At the end of the day, destinations and potentially even tourism operators have really valuable information that's very well researched, very well written, very detailed, verified. So, valuable context, right? That's the kind of valuable content that large language models need. And so if you think about a partnership with, let's just call it an OpenAI for argument's sake, if you think about a partnership with them, I think there's an interest for them to also partner with the tourism industry because ultimately, if they have the best information and knowledge and licensed data for all the things to do from a tourism perspective in any city around the world, then that's where that's the chatbot people are going to use, right? So I think there's an incentive for them as well. So, for context on this piece, we know that the New York Times are in a lawsuit with OpenAI, and I think several other AI companies. And then there are other media companies who have actually done like partnership agreements like this with OpenAI. And so The Atlantic is actually one example of an organization that's done that. And interestingly, they kind of said that they did this because they wanted to set a price for their content. They believe that setting a price for their content will actually help the New York Times case because now you have sort of a price, right? Now you can sort of talk about an actual number. And I think sooner rather than later, it's going to be important for the tourism industry to get together and figure out sort of, go and negotiate some kind of licensing terms with these model providers as well. So that is something that I'm personally committed to. We will get to. I just have a few other things we need to work out and work through before we get there.
Nice. I know we are exploring partnerships and how we can support tourism organizations with partnerships as much as we can. So if you are interested in anything like that, please do give us a shout. We've got lots of other opportunities to collaborate as well. So drop us a line anytime. I want to jump back to the Tourism Kelowna website chatbot, just because I think it's also important to note. I know everyone's least favorite thing is talking to someone who is not a human when they're looking for support. One thing I will note is it is significantly better than the usual chat support you usually find online for starters, but also if the chatbot can't find the answer for you, it will redirect you to a real person. So we're still maintaining that human connection.
Yeah, and I want to actually touch on what you just said there, Emily, because I've talked to quite a few tourism DMOs and operators, and people have had pretty bad experiences with chatbots in the past. So there's a bit of a sort of a bruise on the chatbot industry in the tourism space. Hasn't worked well in the past, but these are different. These are using large language model technology, AI technology, and they're just smarter and they're better and they're good at retrieving. They're more accurate. So they're better. So I feel like people had early experiences with bad products, but that does actually sort of speak to the need to vet chatbot providers and make sure you're working with a good one. And that's certainly a role that Tourism AI Network is playing for the tourism industry. So we're heavily into the vetting business through one of our partners. And so, we are actually going to be coming out in September with a sort of a suite of tools that we recommend that are well vetted, that we've sort of understood, they work well, they've been tested. So stay tuned, those will be coming soon because, not all chatbots are created equal either.
Absolutely. And to kind of tie this back to our first point in terms of finding your pain points and working those out in a way that works for you, we do have exceptional workshops that Peter leads to make sure that you're addressing the most painful parts of your job and making it much, much easier with AI. So once again, drop us a line if you're interested in learning more. Okay. I want to jump into our last topic of the day. Peter, thank you so much for letting me chat about my experience at the Phoenix Art Museum. I was actually in Phoenix last month and had I had some time to kill before I went to the airport, if I'm being completely honest. So I wanted to drop by the Phoenix Art Museum. I'm a big museum gal, but the one thing that I struggle a little bit more with art museums is you don't necessarily always get the full backstory. So want to talk about a couple different exhibits that were going on there and kind of how I think AI could make them a little bit better. So the first one that I checked out was the Barbie exhibit. Highly recommend. Obviously, Barbie's a hot topic right now. It was great. It kind of walks you through the history of Barbie and the actual doll itself, given, it's an art museum. And so that one I found was pretty good. I think there's probably some history behind the organization, the company that, you could look into using AI, but not necessarily as required, I would say, as the second exhibit I checked out, which was artists from the Eastern Bloc right after the Soviet Union had dissolved. So quick background for those who may not know, a lot of the time artists were not necessarily allowed to practice art, but they did so. And that was more or less what the exhibit was on. But what I found myself wondering was more about, it covered a ton of different countries within the Eastern Bloc. I don't have, excuse me, I don't have necessarily the nuanced perspective of what each country was going through, what different rules and regulations they had. So I think a really great opportunity that AI could support in that is giving visitors more context on the world. During that time, obviously, I am only 26, so I didn't actually really live through that. So I don't have a lot of lived experience in that either. I would also like to note that I have a background in political science. So even for my age, I probably have a little bit more context around the Eastern Bloc and the breakup of the Soviet Union than most. So really being able to have a guide that you could take through the museum with you to help you understand the context of the time, the experiences of the artists in each country, I think would be really, really valuable.
Yeah. As you think, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there because I was just actually reading an article about Meta's Vision Pro, like their glasses that they have with Ray-Ban, their deal with
Right.
Ray-Ban. And I was just reading the article in context of Jan LeCun, who's the head AI scientist at Meta, was sort of saying that, likely some of the tools they've been releasing aren't going to be available in Europe because of the European EU AI Act. And one of the things he mentions, right, this is sort of a bit of a tangent of what you're saying, but it's somewhat relevant, is one of the things he said was, as an example, the Meta Ray-Ban glasses vision capabilities won't work in Europe because the AI model that we sort of built into those glasses isn't going to be supported there. But conceptually, about with respect to what you're talking about, wouldn't it be cool if you went into a museum and you sort of put on these glasses and you can sort of have a conversation with your Ray-Bans as you're walking through and it can answer your questions and things like that. I think that'd be really neat, right?
Absolutely. And I think the point that I'm trying to make is I think there's so much opportunity for AI to support, experiences like these. There's a ton of debate out there, and I certainly have a perspective, which I can share if it is of interest, but around art and AI. Obviously, some people are using AI to create quote unquote art. Some people think it is, some people think it's not. It is what it is. But my point here is I think we can still enjoy the, quote, I mean, the true, I would say, art that has been created in the past by, self-identified artists while using artificial intelligence to really supplement that experience and give it new context.
Yeah. And I think just again on that note, we probably have all been through exhibits of various different kinds where there's sort of you put on some headphones and there's a
Yeah.
recorded message and it gives you some context or whatever. But I think to your point is now with the large language model technology, retrieval augmented generation and things like that, now all of a sudden you can feed those things a knowledge base and it can sort of give a lot more context. It can answer questions. It could be interactive. It could be a lot more richer than it is, I think. So I think you're right. I think that's a really, really great opportunity for museums and other exhibits.
Yeah, and I don't want to knock the Phoenix Art Museum because they did provide a lot of context around, the perspectives and experiences of these artists. But at the same time, there were still so many questions that I had in terms of, for example, underground art groups that they would all get together, quite illegally, but to create art. And so, just understanding more about those specific groups, there's only so much you can put on the plaque next to the painting. So just being able to give it a little bit more context. And then the last example that I wanted to talk about is a lot more simple, but I still think it would be really valuable. I did have to rush to the airport, so I really wasn't able to catch too much more of the museum. But they did note that they had a Frida Kahlo painting. I do have a background in Spanish language learning. And so with that, we obviously learned all about the culture, the art, etc. So I wanted to see this Frida Kahlo because I don't actually think we have any in Canada. So wanted to check that out while I was down there. That being said, they had one painting amongst many. So it was a little bit of a wild goose chase, if you'll bear with me on that phrase, to find the Frida Kahlo painting. I did, but it did take me a little bit longer than I would have liked to. So even just having that interactive, AI map, if you will, to kind of show me exactly where it was would have been super valuable. Then I would have been able to get in and get out. I think if I hadn't found it within the next, 5-10 minutes of me actually finding it, I probably would have missed it because I probably would have had to leave. But just really creating those customized and personalized experiences for people who really are interested in, specific artists. I think there's opportunity there too to create almost an interactive map where you might not organize it the same way. Usually art museums organize it either by time frame or by location, which totally works. But if I only want to see art from 1600 to 1650, where do I go to see all those pieces versus which ones are from Venezuela, things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. I think you're right. You're making a good point in the context of like these tools can be a lot smarter than just a stagnant, like a stagnant sort of map or even an interactive map, but that sort of doesn't have a lot of sophistication built into the back end. And these aren't that difficult. Like it's like we talked about website chatbots. Essentially, it's the same concept, right? So it's like here's a bunch of knowledge, bunch
yeah.
of information. Here's a chat agent of some kind or a chat sort of user experience. Go right, and it's not that complicated.
Totally. And then you can kind of create almost like a self-guided customizable tour for your guests. So
Yeah.
something to consider.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Emily, that this sort of fits in nicely to the conversation we had about sort of content as well, right? And
Yeah,
even the AGI conversation in the context of AI agents and reasoning capabilities and things like that. Like these are all things that are going to make the tourism industry's ability to provide customized, really cool experiences that much better, right? And then again, it frees up humans then to have more time to sort of go above and beyond and create even better human experiences, right? So I think that's sort of how people in the tourism industry really need to be thinking about this stuff. And I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit opportunity to kind of wow our guests in pretty inexpensive and simple ways.
100%. Yeah. So something to consider for all the Phoenix or not all the Phoenix art museums, all the art museums out there. Just give it some thought. See what you can do to kind of enrich your guest experience. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and honestly, probably relatively inexpensive as well. You'd be
Yeah.
looking at a very similar model to what Tourism Kelowna implemented on their website, just with a couple of different tweaks. Nothing too crazy. Give it a go, test it out, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
And then I think as we talked about before, also Emily, is that I talked to Amica before the AI robot, and that's sort of taking this concept to the next level, right? So that in itself is an interesting exhibit, if you will, but it's an interactive exhibit that can also serve a function in your museum or in your space, right? So I mean, definitely more expensive, but I think also would bring in interest, so worth considering.
Totally. Think outside the box. That's our message for you today. Overall, would highly recommend the Phoenix Art Museum. Go check it out if you're in the area. It was great and I loved it. So, yeah. With that, that brings our episode to a conclusion. Are there any other takeaways you want to mention before we go, Peter?
I would just say, get out there and try AI. It's summertime right now in the Northern Hemisphere. And so people are obviously off of work a little more and on vacation. And what better time to just give it a try in the comforts of, some quieter time. Just give it a try, see how it works and keep coming back and flex that AI muscle as much as you can.
Totally. If you're going on a trip, see if it'll give you any cool recommendations you might not find on Google.
Totally.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us once again. You can catch Peter on socials at Tourism AI Guy. We are online at tourismainetwork.com. Drop us a line if we can help you with anything. We'd love to collaborate and we'd love to hear from you. Until next week. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Tourism AI podcast. To learn more about the network or get involved, visit our website at tourismainetwork.com or find us on socials at Tourism AI Network. We'll see you there.